Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how our archaic first past the post system puts a lot of power in the hands of a small number of voters, something the Conservatives are very good at taking advantage of, but how they may be indirectly poisoning their own well for later. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, as I've discussed before, with the first past the post system, I mean, you've got like four main types of voter. The first are those who don't vote. They can, but they don't. Or at least they don't reliably vote. So these groups are often disenchanted with politics. Young voters, particularly classic example. And the reason they're disenchanted is because it never addresses the concerns. Why should I vote for any of these politicians? They're not addressing my concerns. And then the politicians will say, well, we're not going to address your concerns because you're not going to vote. It's a waste of my effort. So it's a vicious cycle that will never be broken with our current system. Then there's the second type. Now, those who vote for a party or a candidate who most appeals, the one they go, oh yeah, I like those ideas, even if they've got no chance of winning. Now, these people exist largely to increase the numbers for voter turnout. They're more engaged with politics. They understand the need to engage with politics, but they ignore the specifics of our voting system, and they will also be ignored by politicians because they're not using their vote in a way that influences the outcome. So therefore it won't influence the main campaign messages. Third, you've got the voter who will vote for a party or candidate with a realistic chance of winning. Now, perhaps they do so because they're just fortunate that the party or candidate that they most align with has a realistic chance of winning, or perhaps it's a pragmatic vote. They're doing so to choose the better of a limited choice of options, none of which they're entirely happy with, but they'll go for the better option. But their vote is consistent from election to election. Because despite people thinking that parties change quite a lot and so on, and sometimes, I mean, recently, I suppose it has a little bit, generally speaking, the parties have the same modus operandum and these voters' priorities tends to be the same. You know, so they don't influence the election either. Finally, there's the swing voter. These will vote for one candidate in one election and a completely different candidate in the next election. They will constantly review which party or candidate they think is best for the foreseeable future, unconcerned about their past records or their own past voting behaviour. And this sounds like the sort of voter who's very tuned in, paying careful attention to politics, but actually many of these people know very little about politics, which is why they allow themselves to believe that very different parties can be the best choice for them in different elections. But it is this last kind who determine the balance of power in Parliament during each election. But who those people are can change. You know, this is because the demographic balance in marginal constituencies can change over time. For example, one thing that made Labour vulnerable in the Red Wall onslaught that hit them in 2019 was a shift of particularly younger people out of the northern industrial towns into the cities. Ironically, Labour's investment in education sort of bit them on the arse, electorally speaking. It's not to say they shouldn't have done it. Young people in these knackered former industrial towns, you know, the industry, the ironies upon ironies, crushed by the years of Thatcher. So these young people go off to university, then they want graduate jobs. But they found that the graduate jobs are mostly in the cities, right? So you had a load of younger people moving to the cities from these sort of dying towns. Labour then go on to win many of these city constituencies by large margins. It's concentrated with the sorts of people who will vote Labour. What's left behind are pensioners, who mostly vote Tory, middle-aged homeowners, who mostly vote Tory, and manual or semi-skilled workers without much formal education, so without that critical thinking education, who often read the tabloids and the Tory press and are at risk of voting Tory as a result, as they did for the sake of Brexit. You know, the demographic shift meant that some of these former Labour strongholds were going to flip to the Tories no matter what. Didn't matter who was leading Labour, didn't matter what the policies were. The demographic shift had just moved in favour of the Tories, towards homeowners, towards pensioners. But there is a suggestion that the Conservatives, through their own policies, may be doing a similar hatchet job on their own safe seats later on. I don't mean the reasons why the so-called blue wall is crumbling right now. That is down to multiple reasons, not the least of which is that the Conservative Party has abandoned its conservatism and lurched fairly heavily to the right. I mean, top Boris Johnson fan Peter Cruddas, who is spearheading a campaign to get the former Prime Minister reinstated, is trying to claim that Johnson's government was centre-right, but that Sunak's is actually left-wing. And I don't just mean left of Johnson's government, but actually left-wing. Well, austerity is not left-wing. Running down public services is not left-wing. Making ordinary workers pay higher taxes while refusing to apply windfall taxes to large corporations, raking it in, is not left-wing. Demonising asylum seekers is not left-wing. Making peaceful protest illegal is not left-wing. In fact, that's not even centre-right. That's quite right-wing. The reason why the Tories were looking vulnerable in some of their own safe seats was because Tory policies had moved very far to the right. This was fine in 2019 when the centre and centre-right were more scared of Corbyn than Johnson, but there's no such fear for the Tories to play on with former Director of Public Prosecutions and Knight of the Realm, Keir Starmer. And this is a short-term problem for them. If the Tories lose the next election, they'll reshuffle their front bench a bit. At the next election, they'll pretend to be a different party. Oh, yeah, we've had a thing. Oh, yeah, we got that wrong. Oh, it was these people. It was these people. They messed up. Yeah, we've got different people in now. And I do think in time they will change. I think they'll genuinely reform. They'll have to. But I'm not sure I see them being up for the battle after the next election, because it will be a battle. They'll have to fight a big internal battle. I don't think they've got it in them just yet. I think they'll have to lose at least twice before they'll have to think to themselves that they're not getting back into power until they face their own demons before they do. But they will tell the electorate that they've changed. And being in opposition, they can go back to promising great things without needing to prove delivery, because they're in opposition. What can they deliver? So they will be able to repair the damage to the blue wall. But there seems to be another longer term issue. A shift in demographics again may be on the cards. As a result of the economic damage that the Tories have deliberately inflicted in order to squeeze public sector workers, they've also made city life uncomfortable for younger graduates. Higher cost of living, coupled with a lower level of affordable house building, means that younger voters may need to move further out. I recently read an article which suggested that the combination of these policies could see younger graduates living in the commuter belts. Now, these are generally Tory seats right now, but not such safe Tory seats that they won't be at risk with a sudden influx of inhabitants who hate the fact that the Tories have stolen their futures with a combination of Brexit and more usual Conservative policies. Wouldn't even be compensated by those voters leaving the cities where Labour tend to win. It's not like the Conservatives might have a chance there, because the majorities in these constituencies, the city constituencies are often so large that Labour can afford the loss of this group of voters if it means they weaken the Conservatives' grip on the blue wall. And the same article also made the very good point that many of these voters may not naturally gravitate towards the Conservatives that get older. See, we're used to this idea as people naturally get older, they tend to flip more conservative. We know not all do, but generally speaking, there is a shift towards voting Conservative as people get older. The reason why the Conservatives do so well amongst older voters is not just because they pretend to prioritise policies that appeal to them, but because they are the unashamedly party of capitalism, the only one of the mainstream parties that's the unashamedly party of capitalism. When people transition from being borrowers and renters to property owners and savers, then selfish self-interest tells them that they should back the Conservatives, because capitalism's now doing me some good. But the younger generation now, they're not going to experience this newfound appreciation for capitalism because they're not benefiting. They see the impact of capitalism on the environment, for example. They see the impact of capitalism on themselves, and it's not a positive one. They can't get onto the housing ladder. So when they're of an age, maybe getting towards my age, and they decide that they need to start voting, so that groups naturally start voting in larger numbers because they start to see that they, instead of just grumbling, they need to actually put a tick in a box. They're not going to see the Tories as best for them. You know, it made the point that the high cost of childcare means many mothers, for example, are dropping out of the workforce. Now, our economy powered up in recent decades as a result of more women in the workplace, as it did in many other advanced economies. But Tory policy is reversing this. Childcare costs too much. And these mothers are not going to grow up to be Tories if their struggles in the workplace prevent them acquiring the wealth that the Tories promised to protect. You know, as I've been discussing a bit recently, Tory policy over the past 12 years has been designed to essentially crush our public services, or at least the public funded versions. The privatised ones have failed due to their priority for profit. But the indirect impact of the way they chose to do it is that the next generation of older voters, the ones who vote in large numbers, will not have as high a proportion of homeowners. And the generation after that be even smaller proportion. And millennials are essentially going to feel more and more frustrated with the Conservatives. This is the party that pushes the idea of go to work hard, get yourself on the housing ladder, blah, 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 blah. These are the steps to take. And they're thinking to themselves, yeah, I can't even get on that first step, can I? You know, they've actively limited the number of homeowners for the future. They rely on property owners for their voter base. The average cost of a house now is way beyond the average salary to be able to afford. Of course, the Tories won't die out, won't kill them out, too much money involved, but they will not be able to behave as they do now in 20 years' time. So the Conservative Party we have right now cannot exist in the future. They'll have to transform the repeal because they'll have spent the last decade killing the goose that laid the golden eggs. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.